The IMF revised growth estimates for China's economy. Experts say it will recover strongly over the next year. Owen Fairclough has this.
On the rebound, China's economy ended 2023 beating forecasts and advanced economies. And the International Monetary Fund has revised its 2024 China projections. Having initially forecast 4.2% growth, the IMF thinks Chinese gross domestic product will expand by 4.6%. That's not the breakneck growth of previous years, but it's stronger than the global average and that of all advanced economies. While the IMF says problems in China's real estate sector remain broadly contained, it's also calling for those problems to be urgently addressed. And it's calling for long-term reforms aimed at balancing an economy that boomed as a global export engine, but is consuming more as it matures and moves into producing high-tech products. And the IMF also notes that tax reforms have helped ease trading conditions for small and medium-sized businesses. And China has recently reported that its 5.2% economic growth last year was higher than expected. In 2024, the basic trend of our country's economic recovery and long-term improvement has not changed. From the perspective of fiscal revenue, as the effects of macro-control policies continue to be implemented and high-quality development has firmly advanced, and fiscal revenue will continue to grow restoratively. And as a world leader in renewables, China is aiming to add more green energy capacity to its national power grid by 2025. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
For more on China's economy, William Lee joins us, Chief Economist at the Milken Institute. Always good to see you, my friend. Here's an easy question. Things are getting better in China, or it appears to at least. But there's a little issue of the stock market over there. What's going on?
Well, there's a disconnect between the way the world perceives China's evolving and the way the policymakers have tried to grow China. The policymakers have really put a lot of fiscal emphasis, and a lot of fiscal policy has been put in place to try to overcome the drag from COVID. And that means that a lot of the spending has been public sector spending. And the stock market's saying, hey, but we care about the private sector. The private sector really doesn't seem to be so healthy yet. The consumption isn't there. Investment in the private sector without any government subsidies is not doing well at all. So the private sector is saying, we need more help in the private sector. We need to have confidence in the private sector and consumption particularly to be stronger, and that's when the stock market will start to revive again.
Our friends in Beijing have been working overtime, I think, over the past year to try to figure out how to give the economy a little boost. We've got a little restructuring in some of the banks, which would obviously help the banks, and then that would obviously help, I suppose, the property market, which, as you do and our viewers know, that is a huge part of China's economy.
Absolutely. And in fact, the IMF has been emphasizing that fiscal policy needs to shift its focus away from the supply side. China's done a phenomenal job in improving the supply efficiencies and becoming world leader in EVs and other leading edge technologies. But right now, the domestic consumers really need help, and they need to have some kind of income support. They need to have some kind of assurance that when they get older, they will have a safety net under them. And so IMF and others, including me, have emphasized the need for a social safety net put in place by the government, like a social security system. And I think that's would go a long way to reassuring people, building confidence, and getting consumption back online again.
What about the employment situation? I mean, before you can retire, so to speak, you do have to have a job, and China is a very big country with a lot of people looking for work, and you're constantly creating jobs to make sure the economy is growing, and that is a huge challenge that I think the rest of the world probably doesn't fully appreciate.
As always, you hit on exactly the key issue, Phil. The employment security is something that really is something that the private sector needs to worry about, and the government needs to worry about. And in order to get employment going, one of the key things is to attract foreign capital and foreign firms, because foreign firms are only about 3% of total companies in China, but they account for 10% of employment. They account for 16% of tax revenue, 40% of trade. So foreign companies and foreign technology is very important for China. And President Xi, in his visit to San Francisco, tried to encourage more Western investments, but he really didn't go far enough to say, we are open for Western capital to come in, and we will let you find out whatever you need to find out to assure yourself that China is a good place for investment.
China is one of the richest countries in the world. They have a huge monetary reserve. They have plenty of companies, both private and state-owned, with very big bank accounts, not just in China, but all across the world. And I'm going to assume that China wants China to invest in China, and I'm not sure how much they need the foreign investors, but by themselves, they have more than enough firepower to invest in China.
There's a lot of firepower in China, no doubt about it. But it's the key is, can you catalyze the firepower to get China into the 21st century leading edge technologies? Because that's where President Xi has said he wanted China to go, to be leaders in key technologies. He's been very successful with EVs, but there's a whole range of green technologies and other forms of industry that China really needs to get on board with and integrate into the rest of the world. China can develop a lot of stuff, but it can't be its own standards. It has to be integrated with the standards of the rest of the world, and Europe and the United States already have a lot of practices that China needs to integrate with, and I think getting that done is really the challenge for policymakers right now in China.
And for China, they are essentially a major trading partner with probably, I'm guessing, 100 different countries around the world, if not more. And specifically closer to home over in Southeast Asia, I mean, this is a huge, not only manufacturing base for them, but also for customers as well. As that economy continues to grow, I'm going to guess that China most likely or should likely benefit from that.
Oh, not only that, Asia is really the obvious first place to have low value added industries move to, but Africa is something that China has also emphasized. That is a young population, young workers, lots of raw materials, and China's been working for decades now to make more and more inroads into Africa. It's been fairly successful at that, and I think it needs to really integrate Africa and supply technology into Africa to let them build the goods and services to import back into China, and that will allow Chinese jobs to be in the higher value added and higher paying sectors and higher paying occupations, which would go back to what we said before, reassure a lot of consumers about income security and the ability to not have to save, right? The ability to spend with the assurance that their jobs are secure.
Around the world, since rates have popped up for the majority of countries and we're coming out of COVID, there's been a lot of question marks, specifically when it comes to real estate loans, be it residential, be it commercial, or even industrial loans. And we've had headlines from different banks around the world citing problems. China is no different. What can Beijing do to alleviate some of those concerns, or what more could they do?
The property market in China is really quite unique. The property market represents 70% of household savings, and so it's very important to get that right. And right now, there's the feeling among a lot of property holders that there's a Ponzi scheme going on. I pay a lot of money up front, the developers collect my money, but I don't see my building being built. I don't see my apartment being built. So reforming the way the property market and property developers work would go a long way toward reassuring people that they really have safety in their savings in property. The other thing is local financing. A lot of governments in the local sectors depend on selling land to property developers as a source of revenue. Cutting back on the need for selling land and giving the local governments more transfers from the federal government or more ability to tax would also diversify the need for financing on the part of local governments away from the property sector and make reforms much more easily, much more possible.
It's always good to see a little construction. I always get excited about it, but seeing those cranes and the workers going at it, that's always a positive thing for any economy. Willingly, good to see you, my friend. Have a great weekend.
Have a good